Far from the noisy towns and crowded markets stood a quiet village called Oduka. The village rested between two gentle hills, as if the land itself had decided to protect it from the troubles of the world. Red earth paths curved between clay houses roofed with palm leaves and old zinc sheets. In the early morning, smoke from cooking fires rose slowly into the pale sky like thin grey ribbon. Roasters crowded loudly before sunrise. Women pounded yam in wooden mortars, their steady rhyme echoing through the village. Children ran barefoot along the dusty roads, laughing freely as they chased goats and chickens. The people of Oduka lived simple lives. They farmed the land, fished in the river, and gathered every evening to share stories beneath the moon. But among the many houses stood one small lonely hut at the edge of the village. And inside that hut lived a woman whose story was filled with quiet sorrow. A widow named Mama Nkem. Mama Nkem was once known as one of the happiest women in Oduka, but the years had slowly changed her. Her once bright wrappers had faded from washing and sunlight. Her shoulders were slightly bent from carrying firewood and water for many years. Her face still carried kindness, but the lines around her eyes showed the weight of many lonely nights. Whenever she walked through the village market, people greeted her politely. "Good afternoon, Mama Nkem." She would nod gently. "Good afternoon, my children." But few people stopped to speak with her for long. Widows in Oduka were often treated like passing shadows, noticed for a moment, then forgotten again. Mama Nkem's house stood close to the narrow path that led to the river. The clay walls that were cracked in some places from many raining seasons. The roof sagged tightly, patched with old palm leaf tied together with rope. Inside the house, there were only a few belongings. A wooden stool, a clay pot used for cooking, a rolled sleeping mat, and an old fishing net that once belonged to her husband. Sometimes, Mama Nkem touched the net gently as if it carried a piece of his memory. That house had once been filled with laughter, but now it's mostly held silence. Before sorrow entered her life, Mama Nkem was married to a fisherman named Obiora. Obiora was strong, cheerful, and loved by many in the village. His laughter was loud and warm like sunlight after rain. Every morning, before the sun rose, He carried his fishing net and walked towards the river. Mama Nkem always walked beside him. That would stand on the river bank together, while the mist still floated above the water. Bring back the biggest fish today, she would say playfully. Obiora would laugh. If the river is kind to me, we will feast tonight. Every evening, Obiora returned from the river with his canoe filled with fish. Neighbors gathered around their house. Some came to buy fish. Others came simply to hear Obiora's stories. The river tried to trick me today, he once joked loudly. The fish were hiding under the canoe. The children laughed. Mama Nkem cooked soup while smiling gently at her husband's endless stories. Their home was filled with warmth and laughter. Those were the happiest years of Mama Nkem's life. One year, the rainy season arrived earlier than usual. Dark clouds covered the sky for many days. Heavy rain poured across the land, filling the river until it grew wild and restless. The elders warned the fishermen. The river is angry, they said. Stay away until the waters calm. But many families had little food to eat, and fishermen depended on the river for their living. One early morning, Obiora prepared his canoe. Mama Nkem watched him with worry in her eyes. The river is not safe, she whispered. Obiora placed his hand gently on her shoulders. I will not go far, he promised. Just enough to catch a few fish. The sky was still dark as he pushed the canoe into the restless river. Mama Nkem stood quietly on the river bank. She watched him fade away into the mist. That was the last time she saw her husband alive. That evening, the wind grew stronger. The sky darkened quickly. Mama Nkem waited at the river bank. After long, the other fishermen had returned, but Obiora did not appear. Night slowly covered the village. Still, she waited. The sound of the rushing river filled the darkness. The next morning, villagers gathered with lanterns and ropes. They searched along the river bank. They called Obiora's name across the waters, but only the echoes of their voice returned. Days passed. Then one morning, something drifted slowly towards the shore. It was Obiora's empty canoe. The fish net was still inside, but the fisherman was gone. When Mama Nkem saw the empty canoe, her knees weakened. Her cry echoed across the river bank. The villagers lowered their heads in silence. They knew what the river had done. From that day forward, Mama Nkem became a widow. Time moved after Obiora's death. Mama Nkem's house became quiet. The laughter that was once filled the room disappeared. Visitors slowly stopped coming. The nights became the hardest. Sometimes she lay awakened, listening to the wind, remembering the sound of Obiora's laughter. To survive, Mama Nkem began growing food behind her house. Cassava, pumpkin leaves, pepper plants. Every morning she walked in the soil with tired hands. Sometimes she spoke softly while walking. Obiora loved pumpkin soup, she would whisper. The wind carried her quiet words away. Months later, Mama Nkem began visiting the river every evening. The path was narrow and lined with tall grasses. Birds rested in nearby trees while the sun slowly faded. She always sat on the same smooth stone beside the water. At first, she cried. Later, she simply talked. River, she whispered one evening, if you have seen my husband somewhere in your endless journey, tell him I still remember him. The water flowed quietly, carrying leaves, carrying branches, carrying her lonely words far away. But Mama Nkem did not know something strange had been happening all along. The river had been listening. For many years, one evening, the sky glowed orange as the sun prepared to sleep. Mama Nkem sat quietly on the stone and sighed. River, you took the only man who loved me. The water rippled slowly. Then suddenly, a whisper rose from the flowing current. Old woman, I did not take him. Mama Nkem froze. Then suddenly, her heart began to race. Slowly, she looked around the empty river bank, but no one was there. The voice came again. I have listened to your sorrows for many years. Mama Nkem stared at the water with trembling eyes. Because in that moment, she realized something impossible. The river had spoken. Stay tuned for more and stay tuned for part 2. Thank you for following and watching and subscribing up to now. Please subscribe for more interesting stories. Thank you.